So I'm going to have Caroline is going to be running the slides. We're going to try this just a little different, and I'm going to be, when we get into the demo, we'll be getting into Salesforce. So hopefully this will work well back and forth. We won't be doing too much swapping. And we do have you all muted, and so when questions do arise, feel free to type them in the chat window, and we will get to them as quickly as we can, promising you that we will answer your questions that come up. Okay, so let's talk about what our journey is today. Oh, sorry. Caroline, I forgot we had our slides with our pictures. So these are what we look like. And a little bit of information about us. Caroline is a winter 2014 Salesforce MVP, working primarily with arts organizations that are nonprofits. And her favorite nonprofit starter pack 3.0 feature is customizing household names, which is pretty darn cool. And I'm working with, I just got in, summer 2014 MVP.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Caroline. And my favorite nonprofit starter pack 3.0 feature is seasonal addresses. It's pretty cool. So our journey today, we're going to go over a little bit about, Caroline's going to go over what the nonprofit starter pack 3.0 is. We'll kind of go back and forth a little bit about why the upgrade, and then we're going to go into how. We will do a demo in there in between the why and the how. And then we'll have some resources for you. Just so you know, and someone did ask this question, this session is being recorded. We will provide you a link to the recording, which we'll also be sharing publicly. And also we'll be offering another one of these after Dreamforce. So we're happy to share that with you. So Caroline, take it away.
Okay, so I think the straightforward answer to what is the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 is it's an updated and upgraded version of the Nonprofit Starter Pack. And I think most of you who are on the call today are using the Nonprofit Starter Pack, or at least some of it. The Nonprofit Starter Pack is actually 6 separate applications that all go together into one bundle, and includes the way that you manage contacts and organizations, the way that you manage households, how you look after recurring donations or pledges of recurring donations. That's the when somebody's going to pay you a certain amount each month. You can also, you have some tools around relationships, around affiliations to organizations, and there's a little batch data entry tool which is can be really useful if you've got a bunch of donations that you need to enter in, or gifts that you need to enter in a hurry. So it was all 6 packages, and they've all got different bits and pieces that have been updated and upgraded, and we'll talk about them in some detail. I've actually started though with a slide about what hasn't changed, because I did get asked this question early on, and I think so. We're starting with a little bit of reassurance, which is that that a lot of what you do and what you see in Salesforce at the moment will not change at all with Nonprofit Starter Pack 3. You can still use the same customizations of page layouts that you have. You can still use all of your custom fields. And unless you choose to, there isn't going to be any change to your data at all. So a lot of things can stay almost exactly as they are now by doing the upgrade. And the other thing is that I just wanted to say is that for a while there was the name Cumulus floating around, which is what the Salesforce Foundation used as their as the title of the project and of the development. Now that the upgrades are finished, it's back to being called the Nonprofit Starter Pack. So Cumulus not really relevant anymore. It's a development thing. But there are plenty of things that have changed. I think I heard from the developers, I think the last time that they kind of really looked at the nonprofit starter pack in a lot of detail was around 2009, something like that, was the last major change. And obviously, as you're probably all aware, lots of things change in Salesforce all the time. So, so part of what they've been doing with the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3, the developers at the Salesforce Foundation, is to really sort of catch up on a lot of the new things that have happened within Salesforce and kind of bring the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 up to date. So this is the quick summary. Ashima, we've got a slide for kind of each of these. Do you want to talk about things in a little more detail? Sure. And I'll move on to the next slide.
Sure.
If I can get my mouse in the right place. There we go.
So one of the things that has changed in the Nonprofit Starter Pack is that we, instead of having all of these separate packages, which still exist, as you can see here, everything is managed in one central package. So the install is one, and the updates will happen automatically now. You don't have to go out and check to see whether or not there's an update needed. So that's really helpful. It gets pushed out by the Salesforce Foundation, and you're always going to be on the same version. So this is sort of what all those packages look like.
I mean, that installation actually is really cool now, isn't it? Because you get all this sort of progress bar and things as well, so you can actually see how it's going and that everything has been updated.
And if there are any errors, you'll see red. It'll say error, and it's really good that way to give you information, and then you can definitely follow through on what the error might be. And then the updates, I think, is a big one. They automatically get done for you, pushed out by the Salesforce Foundation. The other thing that's really nice is that all of your settings now are on one tab. So you might remember that the nonprofit settings, you had this app, and you would go, and there were these multiple tabs, and you had to kind of find where is that one field where I can change the end value for number of days. Now you don't have that. It's all in one nice tab. Everything's included, including error messages and any error logs. And then another really nice feature that's a part of 3.0 is something called the health check, which is it checks the health of your instance and gives you any data issues that might be there. So, you know, if there's any, for example, if there's a one-to-one account that is out there that's orphaned, or for some reason there's a household that doesn't have any contacts in it, it will give you that information here and give you errors. And we'll show you, we're actually going to get into this a little bit so you can see what errors look like and how you deal with them and what information they give you. And then finally, I think this is another big one, is the documentation. They've really written, expanded, a lot of resources and time has gone into really getting some really good documentation available for people to understand how the Nonprofit Starter Pack works. So with that, I'll turn it over to Caroline, who will kind of give you a little more information about contacts and organizations and how that has changed.
So yeah, I think those are some of what Ashima's just covered are some of the kind of general things about more useful for an admin. But I think where, as a user, you'll see the biggest changes are in what's happened to how you manage contacts in organizations and households. And one of the things it said that I really liked is the fact that you can now choose how you name your household. And primary contacts and affiliations. I'll go on through the slides and then I'll come back and mention one of these. So you used to be really stuck when you used nonprofit packs, starter pack households before, that you were kind of stuck to what the foundation had chosen, which pretty much meant last name and household. And that's really annoying if you've got lots of Smiths or Browns, or what's the most common surname in Korea, I think, is Kim. That's something that applies to at least one of the organizations on this call. So if you weren't careful, and unless you renamed these yourselves, you could end up with multiple Smith or Kim households and not really know which one was which. So one of the things I love is that you can now choose how you want to name your households. And there are some pre-built ones here. You know, you can use the last name, you can use the first name and the last name. You can even call people a family or instead of a household. But you also have the option to choose other. And we'll look at this a little later on in the demo, which means that you can actually pick any of the fields that you use on the contact record and use them as part of your household naming. And similarly, you can change what the greetings are going to be, the formal and informal greetings. And this is a tiny detail, but isn't this nice as well, that you can, if you're joining two names in a household, you can choose whether you want it to be an and or an ampersand or whatever. So that bit of customization is lovely. Some of you probably do this already with your households. I know that I've built this something similar for quite a lot of you. Is this idea of designating who the head of the household is, or your kind of main contact within the household? And one of the things is that now this has just been built in and made much easier. So when you look at a household record, you can immediately see who the primary contact is. And the default here is that it's going to create you, it's going to create whichever contact you added first. I think with the idea that if you're setting up a household, you're probably going to have your main contact is probably going to be the first contact you create, but you can change who the primary contact is. And along this idea of having somebody, a kind of main contact, the other one that they've introduced is this idea of a primary affiliation. So if somebody has a relationship with an organization, you can designate, or if somebody has a relationship with many organizations, you can designate which of them is the kind of main organization that they're affiliated with. So for example, if you have that somebody is an employee or a founder or a manager at some company, they're also on the board of another organization, then their primary affiliation will probably be the one to the company that they work for. And you can choose that of the multiple organizations. And then the other side of this is that on the organization itself, you can show who has been chosen as kind of the primary affiliate. So who is the main representative of the organization that you're dealing with. If I just go back briefly, there's one more point that I put on this slide. The new default middle name and suffix fields. What that means is that Salesforce at the moment, in one of its most recent releases, has actually finally decided that it's actually quite important to know what people's middle names are. And that also the suffixes to their names, that is, you know, junior and senior and a number, are actually quite important. And so they're actually going to build them into contact records by default. So we won't have to do all that customization that we used to have to do with you. And the reason why the feature isn't quite generally available in Salesforce yet, it's still in pilot, but when it comes, the good thing is that the nonprofit starter pack will recognize that people do have middle names and suffixes, and you'll be able to use those in fields, which you couldn't necessarily before. It's always been a little bit of a struggle to incorporate middle names and suffixes if we did custom things. So those are some of the things that are available if you upgrade to the nonprofit starter pack, but stick with what you're currently doing. So if you currently use the one-to-one account model, or you use the individual bucket model, or you even use some kind of hybrid, then all of those features that we've just shown, those 4 features, plus the general settings features that Ashima talked about before, will all be part of the upgrade. But I think probably the biggest difference about Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 is that you are able now to pick a third account model. And you now have more choices than you had before. And this new model is, it's called the household account model. And some of you who are my clients who are on this call, I hope, are at this point going, yes, finally, it supports what Caroline tried to customize for us. So I'm going to, and in order to explain kind of the significance of this, I'm just going to bear with me while we do a little kind of basics about Salesforce, because I also think there's also a little bit of confusion maybe about how what these choices of model mean. In the default, and yeah, some of you will have heard this from me before. In a default setup for Salesforce, it is after all a tool for people who make sales. You will remember that that basically everybody has to be associated in some way with a company or a business. The sort of central object in the Salesforce database is the idea of account. And anything that happens in terms of money or business that's coming in to sell, that you're recording in Salesforce, your sales, your deals, your gifts, all have to be associated with an account. So the idea here being that you're doing deals between businesses. Of course, there are people who work at that business, and so they are the contacts. But for those of you who've kind of struggled with this donation thing, you'll remember that this is one of the problems. The direct relationship goes between the opportunity, that is the donation or the gift, and the account. It only is associated indirectly with the contact. There's no straight across the middle relationship. And of course, for us in the nonprofit world, this is often a problem because we don't always think of people, our contacts, as people who work at businesses. We also have relationships with them as individuals. So there are two ways that we've solved that in the nonprofit world. One is to have this idea of an individual account, into which anyone who you have a direct relationship with goes into the individual account record. Or the other idea is that you have this idea of what they call the one-to-one account contact model. And what it means is that for each contact, there is essentially a duplicate or a mirror account, which is then hidden, but it's exactly the same really as the account. It's exactly the same. The contact and the account are the same thing. And that enables you to have this relationship so that you can see that a gift is associated with a contact, and it goes either through the account or through the contact role. But most of the time you don't see those accounts, they're hidden. And it can cause some confusion. One of the problems is then what happens when you want to group people into households. And the way that the previous versions of the Nonprofit Starter Pack solved this was that then they created this other object, custom object on the side here, which is the household model. And it allows, and it gives you a way of grouping contacts. But one of the problems has always been about the household model, this separate household object. It's great for a lot of things, but it actually makes reporting a bit difficult because, as you see, you've now got really quite a long path and a whole load of relationships between when a donation comes in and when you associate it with a household. And you have to go through various steps through the account or through the contact role to eventually get to the household. So what the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 has done is to say, well, wouldn't it make sense if actually we used the account object to represent households? So this goes, I think, closer to that default model. And basically, household and account are, in the new model, are going to be a combined object. And so you now go back, it makes it much more straightforward. You can associate a donation with a household, but say which member of the household is the kind of the primary on this, and the donor. And one of the things it means is that what you now do is that you have basically two account categories or two account record types, one of which is for the household and one of which is for organizations. Anything you want to just add to that, Ashima, or?
No, I mean, I think it's good that we're heading back to using the standard the standard functionality of Salesforce, and not kind of working around it by creating these hidden one-to-one accounts and potentially confusing people.
So this is called the household account model, and I was going to pass it over to you, Ashima, to just go through what you.
Yes. So right, the household account model is, as Caroline said, she's worked with this, or working with some of the organizations that she's worked with, into having this type of account. And most of the orgs I've worked with, we've been working with one-to-one. So one of the nice features about the household account model, and as you can see before Caroline's slides that were showing how objects related to each other, is that we're sort of going right back to that standard way of Salesforce working. So reporting is so much easier. We're coming back to that standard setup and objects. Yes, thank you. How the objects connect with each other. So reporting on gifts, before it was so challenging, you'll have a lot easier time creating these reports. So here's the one-to-one account and the household. So we've kind of gotten rid of the household now, and we're going to make it a lot easier for running reports. And we'll go over that. We're going to demo some of this so you can see. The auto-syncing of addresses between contacts and households. I know this is specifically for an organization I've worked with. They struggled with this, having addresses in multiple places. There's going to be there's this auto-syncing functionality. It will be very helpful. Seasonal addressing, which of course I said was one of my favorite things. I think it's great. It's automated. You set a beginning date and an ending date and the address, and it automatically updates for you. You can also report on seasonal addresses. We'll show you that. There is some built-in address verification with a tool that's available to, there are a variety of tools that will be available for address verification, meaning, checking to make sure that this is a valid mailing address before you send it out. And most of these tools will be free to nonprofit organizations. And then the roll-up gift fields for the household members as well. There's some new ones that will be available with this account model. So if any of these appeal to you, you'll definitely want to consider moving. So Caroline, do we want to have questions at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Shall we? So I noticed there were a couple in the chat. We'd had a question about the health check, I think. The health check, does the health check identify contacts with no household? No, I think it works the other way around, which is that it will identify for you households with no contact. Because you may have some contacts who don't get associated with a household because they may be associated with an organization instead. But certainly one of the things that you probably would need to know is, do I have any empty households? So the health check will tell you that. And we also had a question about how you do the conversion, and we'll get onto that. We're showing you all the nice features that are part of this new model, and then we'll show you when we've sold it to you. Then we'll show you how to convert.
And you'll want to do it. Julie, you said the sound was lost. I'm hoping that you're hearing. Caroline, are you hearing okay?
I can hear you. Are you still having problems, Julie?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Julie, just either typing in the chat. Okay, she said she's fine. Good.
Okay.
Address syncing bi-directional. So, you mean, I'm assuming when you say bidirectional, that you can push from the contact to the household or from the household to the contact. Caroline, do you know if that's the case?
Yes.
Okay.
It does seem to work both ways, and let's do that as part of the, let's show that
That's
as
a
part of
demo.
the demo.
Okay, that's a good idea. Okay, and then seasonal addressing. Can it be used for street versus P.O. boxes? You mean, Patty, are you meaning just to have, like, I could have a street address, a P.O. box address, a variety of addresses for an individual? You absolutely can. And the idea is vacations, people are in vacation homes, and then during a specific period of time, that's where you want to mail them. That's the intention of seasonal addressing. But you could also use it for additional addresses, although you need to figure out when you would use which.
But they don't have to be timed. I mean, we can look at this as well. I know that if that question was from Christy, I know it's because they have issues around in their town about what you can use as a mailing address and whatnot. So yes, there are kind of two ways that you can use it. You can use simply to have multiple addresses for a contact, which aren't necessarily driven by date, so they don't necessarily change. But the idea of the seasonal addresses is for addresses that change during the year, and you know the times at which they are going to change. Yeah, we'll show you how that works, because you can set up start dates and end dates on those addresses. Okay. Shall we change presenters, Ashima, and go into?
Sure. Yes.
So if I make you the
Are you seeing my screen now, Caroline?
I am now, yeah.
Good. Okay. So we're actually in a test org. I had taken an organization's data and imported it from their production instance into a test to play around with 3.0, and also to give us an opportunity to have something to look at. So we're going to start with Caroline is going to kind of
Can you go into?
I'll click.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. So we're in here now, the Nonprofit Starter Pack, and you'll notice I had clicked up here into a new app, and this is our app now. So we're going to go to settings. Caroline, you want to go over the settings?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned this earlier, and I mean, those are two new tabs that you get when you install the resources, which basically just points you to a lot of the things we're going to tell you about later. And this is the settings. The settings is nice now because it's kind of it's grouped in less, I think, for a developer and more for a user. So it's, now everything to do with households and with and with your contacts is kind of under a people thing, a people heading. Affiliations and relationships are together under relationships heading, and then all that stuff that used to, it's particularly true, all the things that you used to have to set up around donations, which used to live in the household settings tabs, are now kind of where you would expect it to be under donations. Ashima, why don't we have a look at that, the households one, because that's where that custom naming is.
So I just clicked on edit, so we're going to look at what we have available here.
Yeah.
So let's look at this custom naming. So we've got this naming format here. What if I pick other? So now I can change this to be whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I want last name, first name. Oops, yep. And then there's some formatting that you have to be familiar with, right, Caroline?
Yeah. Yeah, but
you
can follow their models as well. and kind of adapt them.
Oops. Make sure you pick the right ones.
And so you can change the formal greeting and you can change the informal greeting, because you could use, for example, exactly, you can put the salutations in or not as you wish. The informal greeting, I can think of, an example might be that if you do have nicknames for people, or you've used some other kind of customized name, custom field. I'm not sure you have one in this demo org, do you?
I don't think I do. Yeah, I don't think I do. But if you had a field like, ooh, Ashima, nickname, you could do something like that and pull the nickname in instead of using one of their fields, you can use one of your fields. And then, of course, as you were saying, the name connector, we could do an ampersand, or we could do and, or we could do whatever we wanted, plus sign, however you wanted to connect it.
Yeah. And the thing to be aware of, I mean, if you scroll down, there's that big red box. So the thing is that the changes that you make would only apply to new households as you create them. But if actually you want to change everything you already have, you can read the warning carefully and then press that big red button, and it will overwrite everything. All of your previous households. Or household names, I would suggest if you're experimenting with it that you don't press the big red button straight away. I would try it and see how it looks, and then if you decide that's really what you want to use, then go back and update everything.
Right. And then you hit save, and those changes are updated.
Are you going to get an error, though, because you don't have a nickname field?
Oh, I got rid of that.
Oh, yes, you did.
I wasn't going to leave it in there.
So shall we just check on account model? I think this is right. Is your just one up from households, Ashima?
Sure.
Are you set up to use the new household account model?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. Yep.
Great. Okay. So I think where you'll notice the biggest change is when you create a new contact. So if you could go to contacts, Ashima, and let's create a new contact. Because for those of you who, I mean, if you're using either the one-to-one or the individual model, you're used to the idea that you type somebody's name in, and there you go, and you save it, and it creates them a one-to-one account. Watch what happens now.
Oh, I didn't do this right.
No, you didn't.
Hey, but this is good. This is why, as Caroline said, you want to test first and then hit that red button. Right?
All right. But
we have to do that.
Okay, but the principle of the thing is that you've created a new household, haven't you? Even though
it's not quite right.
Yeah. Okay, so, and if you want to click on that household, and because you had specified that the first and last names would be both the formal greeting and the informal greeting, then those have been created as well. Okay. So let's add another contact. Shall we add to the same household? Let's do it from the contact record first.
Okay. I'm going to do it. Oh, go to the contact record. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Should we do it as a new contact first?
Sure.
Okay. And this time, because you want Brian to be in the same household, then you'll need to select the household that he's going to go into. Yeah.
We didn't fix this error, but. Oh, and I did make it a plus sign.
Yeah. but you did make it a plus sign. So now you see it's updated and it's added Brian to both the formal and the informal greeting. Now, there was a question about addresses, and actually it seemed to me that you can do it both ways. So you could either add the address to the household now, and it would end up with both of the contacts, or in fact, you can go to one of the contacts and add an address, and it will be on the household as well. Oh yeah, and there's that primary contact field. And because we created Freddie first, he's ended up as the primary contact. So I believe that it's true that if you go to, you could add an address for him on that contact record, Ashima.
Right here?
Yeah, and it would sync.
There's the household address, so we can go to the household now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the address.
Yeah, and it should be on Brian's as well.
We'll go to Brian's record. And there's the address. The beauty of syncing.
Now, for those of you who've used households before, you'll be used to the way that you edit households. So if you click on the edit button, Ashima, because I think I put this view override on. So I think some of you will have seen this format before, which is so that you basically have these little cards. You can choose whether to include somebody's name in the household itself, in their formal or informal greeting. Yeah, you're including or excluding. So this has gone back to being just the Freddie household. Mm-hmm. And you can also add new members. Yeah.
By searching for them, right?
Yeah. So I had a little example. I was being a little more. I was doing Shakespearean characters last night.
Oh.
So under organize, would you like to type in Minola?
Is that right?
Yep. And we're looking for the Minola household.
Okay. There it is.
Mm-hmm. Now, any of you who are Taming of the Shrew experts will recognize, and I believe, and I did look up. This is actually accurately his last name. So here is Father Baptista with the two sisters, Catherine and Bianca, one of whom is extremely popular and the other whom isn't. And of course, as you'll remember, Catherine gets herself married to Patricio. So he actually, Ashima, I mean, he's in a household too, and he is in the De Antonio because he's the son of Antonio. I think if you probably just DEA will probably do it. And a star or whatever. De Alf. Oh no, that's not me. You have another household that is.
DEA, you said?
DEANNT. Try that and see what happens. No.
Very
okay.
Strange.
All right. It should be. It's the. Okay. Is it that you need? Do you need the asterisk or? Oh, I know. There's a space. I beg your pardon. So it's DE space.
Okay.
Yeah. And capital A.
Okay.
There we go. That's him. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. So could you click on edit?
Yes.
And since this is Patricio, he's the one who took her over. Can you see if you can find Catherine and we'll add him to her household? She's that one. And you see there that this is a useful thing, is do you want to merge the two households, or actually are you taking, in this case, you just want Catherine to come out of her father's household and be added to her new one. And here she is. And in her old household, she was excluded from the formal greeting, but maybe with her new husband, she should be included. There we go. And now you can save. So there are the two of them. And then I was thinking, what happens if she decides she actually wants to take his last name? Because you can just edit the contact and everything should update.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to her contact record and edit her last name. There we go. They now share a last name.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So Ashima, what about those multiple addresses? Because we've seen how the addresses now
Yes.
sync between contacts and households. So
Yes. So here we have, we'll just keep using this. Why not, right?
okay, sure.
So right now they're living with his father, but maybe they have a cottage that they go to. I don't know enough, Caroline. Just fill me in Shakespeare.
No, it's fine. You can.
Let's pretend. So we can actually create a new address. So if we click on new address, then we get a new the ability to add this other address. So let's just say cottage in the woods. Again, you fill in all of your information. The seasonal part is we can actually say the month and day that we want this address to be effective, and then the month and day that we want the address to go back to the default, which was his father's house. So we have the ability to make this sort of date change, and what will happen is that as the system runs every day, a batch happens, and that change will automatically happen. And the billing address will be updated with whatever address you have here in the mailing street, city, state, and zip. So very helpful in the sense that you can easily pull seasonal information in now. And there's no year associated with it, so it's really just a month and a day when you want to start, and a month and a day when you want this address to end. And you can always come and change the month and day as well. Caroline, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, should we show how it works? So if this is their vacation, and assume they're still there.
So let's say we started in April 10th, and
we need to keep. Yeah, let's keep them there at the moment. Let's say that they're still there until October.
Okay, so let's do October. Let's do the 31st.
Okay.
And I changed this to a vacation residence. Again, this is a pick list you can modify for anything else. So someone had asked about PO address. You could change this to. Click Save. And you'll notice that the address, we're looking at this address information here. So if we click back onto the household where address has been shifted to a cottage in the woods, and our other address, his father's house in Verona, is still here. It's just not active right now. When this changes, when the date shifts and we go November 1st, actually, because it will run on October 31st, and then on November 1st, the date will be, the address will be changed. So always realize the batch happens the next day. So the date should be either the day before you want it. Does that make sense, Caroline?
It
Anything else you want to
does.
add? Yeah.
Let me look. Is the address thinking bi-directional? Seasonal. Yeah.
The other thing is the address verification services, which is really helpful when you're looking at addresses and you have new ones. This functionality is built in the settings. Sorry, Caroline, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was just looking quickly at the questions that we'd received, and yeah, one of the last one about those addresses is it changes the default address based on the dates. Yes, absolutely, Patty, and it is based on the dates, but you don't have to use dates. You can store multiple addresses and with their address type, and then you would build if you needed to do specific if you needed to use a specific address for a mailing, then you could build a report that suggests that you just look for addresses of a particular type. So yes, if you do have one of these issues around PO boxes versus streets, then this, I think this makes it much easier than it was before to choose which address type you need for a specific purpose. Because I think in this case you'd probably still have the street address being the default, but it would allow you to build a report that says, where you have households that have a PO box address or your mailing address or whatever it is, you can build a report to just look at those address types.
Right. Any other questions that came up?
That seems to be it so far. Do you want to look at the primary affiliation? Do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah, let's do that.
So, I mean, we could very quickly, you could just go back to this Patricio as this primary contact, and create him an affiliation. There's something called I was on that Shakespeare kick again. There's the Montague Family Foundation. That's fine. There you go. And there is a primary checkbox. Yeah, you need to add that onto your affiliation layout. It probably wouldn't have been there before. So let's say yes, he is. This is his main one because he's the founder of it, or he's the chief trustee at the foundation. So now you see that the primary affiliation has arrived in his contact record. And if we were to, and I think if we were to go to the Montague Family Foundation, I'm not sure whether that's on the record layout there, but it would certainly be useful for, let's scroll down to, have we got affiliated contacts? Not sure whether yes, we've got his checkbox there, which is primary. So you can see how this one actually would be really useful for reports. If you're doing, if you want to send a bunch of things to a particular set of organizations, then choosing who you might want to address your mailing to is useful to know because you can use the primary checkbox.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a segue into reporting.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into reporting. So we have a few reports we created just to show you how it will be a little different. So Caroline, you want to do the household account report first?
Yeah, go on. You talk us through that one.
Okay. So this is a report that's showing you people that have given in the last fiscal year. So their last gift was in the last fiscal year. And so you'll notice in this report, we actually have a combination of organizations and households all together in one report. whereas Caroline and I were talking before, we would have had two different reports, one for organizations and one for households, and that is because we now have combined them into one object, and we are able to report on them. And so you'll notice, like in this case, those of you that are from West Michigan know Presto Print well. I'm sure the nonprofit sector does, but we don't have an informal and formal greeting because those are fields we don't have on the organization. We have those on the household. So we can pull this information in and be able to see everything in one report.
Now, there's a whole debate about whether you should report on your household gifts at the same time as your organizational gifts. But I think where this is really useful is if you're trying to do, your kind of donor listing for your annual report or for your program work. It used to be a bit trickier to kind of, because you'd have to have one report that was of the households, and you'd have to have one report that was of the your business and foundation supporters. So one of the advantages now is, because they're all on the account object, is that actually you can pull all that information together at the same time.
Right. Yep. So now let's talk a little bit about the primary contact field, Caroline.
Yeah. Because I was thinking about this for a little bit for when you're doing mailings, because obviously you could just and I think probably a best practice if you're doing a letter mailing, really is to just do a report that is on the households, and because you've got the informal and formal greeting, so you probably could just do a report that is just the households, and then you don't have to worry about duplicates. But what if you wanted to actually email people, and you didn't want duplicates to go the household members to different household members? So then I think this is where this primary contact comes in really useful. Because you can see at the moment the report as it's set up is this is a report of households. So you've got duplicates for different members of the household. I'm not sure why we have. And what you're actually looking at, because you're looking at a primary contact field, you're seeing a duplicate of the primary contact as well. In fact, if we were to add first name and last name, you would see that this is the different members of the household. But if you were to now add a filter for that checkbox, Ashima.
I will gladly do that.
So we've just created a report that just says show us all the contacts within households, and we've ended up with the duplicates because we've got every member of a certain household. So now what we're going to do is, now you will just have to figure out how this works. It is the primary.
So we only want the primary contact. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's the primary contact field on the contact record, which is a checkbox, and it's just show us the ones that's true. And that has now deduplicated your report. So you should now just have, assuming that you didn't go and mark 2 primary contacts on any household, but assuming that that's correct, you now should have a bunch of households with just 1 contact shown.
Great. And I think the last report we were going to show, Caroline, was seasonal addresses.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to get a list of addresses, you can potentially just report on the seasonal address and not have, granted, if you have the beginning date and the ending date, it'll automatically go into billing. But if you just wanted to get a list of the vacation residence or the seasonal address information, you can report on that as well. So that, I'm assuming that's something that would be helpful to people to just know when the address is. And we can add additional fields. I didn't add much here other than the contact and the mailing address, but we could do a start month and end month and see what's happening with that.
But I think that would be really, I mean, this would be a really useful report, wouldn't it, for that, for the people who have the mailbox issue? Because
yes.
if you had a default straight address set up and then you had another one which was where the address type was mailbox or mailing, and then you could put in a filter that is just show the mailbox addresses.
Right. Absolutely. And I wasn't seeing Caroline's because she owned it and I was looking at only mine. So remember that.
There we are. Well, that's part of another webinar we do, isn't it? It's
It's true. It's true.
So
all right. I think that's our demo.
Yes. So I don't see any more questions yet. If anyone has any more, otherwise we'll go back to the slides.
Okay. Let's go back to you, Caroline.
Okay. All right. So a couple of last quick things in the what has changed. There are also two things that get the foundation developers very excited, but may not feel that they make a huge difference to you at this moment. One is that the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 is fully compatible with Salesforce 1. For those of you that haven't experimented with it, Salesforce 1 is the mobile version of Salesforce. Basically, what it means is that if you upgrade to Nonprofit Starter Pack 3, you will be able to, on your phone or your tablet, to actually see all of the fancy layouts and use all of the features that are available in the mobile version of Salesforce. And the other one, which is similar to this, is that that they've done a lot of tidying up of the code, and they've made it essentially Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 more friendly to developers and app builders. And what I mean by that is that there are more things are a bit more standardized. Things are a bit more organized. In other words, if somebody is coming in to build a customization for you, or you want to install a third-party app, it will be much easier to see how the Nonprofit Starter Pack will work alongside that or possibly interfere with it. It's going to be much easier for a developer to see, okay, these are the processes that are in the Nonprofit Starter Pack. This is how I need to adapt what I do in order to fit in with that. It's always been a bit challenging in the past for a developer. They've had to kind of figure out what all this one-to-one account stuff is and that kind of thing. So these are benefits that, as I say, you may not need right at this moment, but hopefully you'll welcome them in future. Oh, I've changed the wrong slideshow. That's because I'm following along elsewhere. Okay, so why should you upgrade? Well, I hope that a lot of what we've said in the last hour, nearly an hour, has helped to give you some ideas about it. You're always going to be up to date. You won't need to do any manual upgrades because of these push notifications. It's going to be easier for you to go into the forums and get help because everyone will know that if you're on Nonprofit Starter Pack 3, they'll know what version you're using and what features are available. There's better documentation. It's easy to go around and to change your settings. You can use the health check at any time in order to figure out how clean your data is. And as we said, we like the customization of the household names, and there's no need to change your data as it is at the moment. So there is kind of two parts to this, and we're going to deal with them in a little while in the how. But just generally, if you want to upgrade to Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 and not have anything to do necessarily with these new household features, just keep your data model as it is now. These are the reasons why you might want to upgrade. However, you could always choose to go to the new model. Ashima, do you want to talk about why somebody
Yeah,
might want to change?
right. So really, this is probably one of the biggest steps, but there's, as we talked about earlier, there's some functionality that is just available to you with this household account model that's not with the other models. So particularly, as you already know, my favorite, seasonal addressing, that's available, as well as address verification support. The bulk of development that's going to be done will be around to support this model as well. So the Salesforce Foundation, while they'll keep the other models, are really going to be moving all of the new users actually out of the box. The Nonprofit Starter Pack will come with the account model turned on. So new Salesforce Nonprofit Starter Pack users will be using the account model. So they're sort of really focusing their energy around this model. As we talked about before, the standards are closer to the Salesforce functionality, so it's easier to integrate with apps, and in particular the one that Caroline have talked about in the past is Dupe Blocker that Demand Tools has. This will work now, whereas before with the one-to-one model it wouldn't work. So granted, if you were in a different hybrid, then it did, but for those of you that were, this will be a helpful thing. We talked about this before. O2 reporting is much more straightforward. I think the big one is this is more intuitive than the previous versions. This seems to make more sense now. You're going to have to undo some of your thinking, but because you were used to the one-to-one or individual model, but it is more intuitive than those hidden one-to-one accounts that were there, and potentially saving you a lot of data storage because you'll have a lot of data that won't be there. And I know, Caroline, we've talked about this, but if you're those clients of yours that are already using the household model and it's sort of an incomplete version, those folks are definitely going to want to migrate over.
And just a few questions. Michael, does it support? Asked if this new household model would support multiple record types, specifically on contact. Yes, is the answer to that. As my understanding, that you can, because basically the households is an account record type. This new household object. So any record types that you might build on contact are supported. And of course, you can always have more than, they're going to set you up on account with a record type for household and a record type for organization, but that doesn't stop you having other record types on that as well. Julie asked if third-party vendors like IATS are supporting the new Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 and the household model. My understanding is that people like IATS and Click and Pledge, who are kind of the two main payment processors, are very much involved in this, and because they mainly deal with contacts, actually the answer is that Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 should work with both IATS and Click and Pledge as they currently are. Yes, possibly. It's kind of, they should work, fingers crossed. But both of those developers are working very hard to make sure that it's fully compatible and are doing their testing. And before Dreamforce, they will both have new versions that support the new household model because they know that that's now the default. And Eric asked about the address verification support. We didn't really explain it very much, but in the settings tab, there is now what it's more, I guess, is the address verification is not built in, but it's become much easier to do than it used to be. And what Salesforce really has, what the Nonprofit Starter Pack developers have done is kind of built out the APIs. They've sort of opened the doors and provided you the hooks so that you can much more easily than before link in an address verification service. And the one that they were starting to recommend during the beta testing was something called Smarty Streets. It's turned out that Smarty Streets are don't kind of discriminate in nonprofits which ones they will support. They kind of look at what your mission is and what your area of interest. And so the foundation isn't officially linking up with Smarty Streets anymore, but the functionality that opened the doors to those things is still there. Do you think that's a fair way to describe it, Ashima?
Very fair. All that dialogue happened over chatter, so if you really want to know more,
yeah,
read chatter feeds.
and it doesn't have to be address verification. It could also be a sort of Google mapping, a kind of geolocation. I've seen a demo of it done where actually you link up to some Google APIs, and so you can actually map contacts rather than doing specific address verification.
Yes, Eric, it's Smarty Streets. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So just quickly, why you might want to stay with your current model, because I guess we should complete this. And Kelly will know that I have her in mind when I wrote this slide. So one of the problems is that you might have built a lot of customization around the one-to-one relationship. It used to be very easier to pull information. Very easy to pull information between contact and account because of that one-to-one relationship. And that's going to be a little trickier to do in a household, in the household model. You may have a very complicated integration, which is kind of was set up to do with one-to-one accounts and contacts, and I hate the thought of even starting to unpick that. Also, you might find that if actually you really deal with very few households, you may be an organization that mostly is dealing with foundations or other organizations. It may not make sense to change. It may be that you're probably using the individual bucket model anyway if you deal mostly with other organizations. So maybe you don't really feel that you need to change with what you have now. And the other thing, of course, is that if you're only using select packages of the nonprofit starter pack, like you only use affiliations or you only use recurring donations, you won't be able to upgrade anyway because they're now all part of the same big package. So you'd have to install contacts and organizations and everything else in order to use recurring donations. So there are certainly going to be some circumstances in which you'll stay with the model that you currently have.
Yeah, definitely.
So it will help if I click the correct slideshow. So Ashima, can we talk about
when should you upgrade? So our recommendation is, if you're not going to change the data model, do it now. There's a lot of support and help. It might take you a few hours. I would plan, if you were saying, Ashima, how much time should we plan? Plan at least half a day. It may not take you that long. Hey, if it takes you less time, then at least you have some time to read some of the documentation and learn more about the features that are available. But the support is active. All new trials are going to have the nonprofit starter pack. The foundation is really pushing that forward. 3.0, so it makes sense. If that's what you're thinking, we don't want to change our data model, we just want to upgrade, then we're recommending that you go ahead and do that. There's no need to wait. If you think you want to change your data model, then our recommendation is just to wait a little while for some of the sort of the dust to settle and for things to really be in a better position, especially with some of the data conversion issues that are coming up. So kind of keep an eye. We're going to give you at the end some resources of where you can look. Reach out to us if you have questions, definitely. But if you're saying, I really want to go, we want to do this upgrade, then give yourself time to do the upgrade and conversion. This is not something you can do over a lunch hour. This is something that you want to spend, I would say, a full day doing. When I did the data conversion and update in the instance that I showed you in test, it took a full day. So I would say give yourself that time to really understand what's happening to the data, to make sure that you kind of have a good idea of what's happening. It is more complicated than what's happening, and there are some quirks that are being experienced. And again, I think, if that you do decide you want to change models, ask us for help, or join the Power of Us Hub group and read what people are going through. It's while they have a conversion process, and I'll talk about the how in a minute, it is fairly complicated. So you definitely want to have some advice and make sure that you're going in the right path. So Caroline, did you want to add anything to that?
Sounds great.
Okay. So now how? How do you upgrade to the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3.0? Really two main steps. The first is creating a sandbox with your current instance, your production instance. Do a developer, and you don't need to pull any of your data over. All you need to do at that point is install the Nonprofit Starter Pack in the sandbox. Follow the post-install steps. We'll give you a link to those steps. And then run a health check. The health check, which we haven't shown you yet, but we will show you a failure so you can see what that looks like. And then if all passes in the sandbox, go to step 2, which is really installing it into production. The key when you're installing it into production is to remember some of the validation rules and required fields that cause problems in the sandbox. What can happen when you run a health, or when you're doing your installation, is that things may not install because you had a validation rule that you didn't turn off, which they do suggest you do, or you had some required fields on either contacts or accounts that caused the installation to fail. Note those so that when you're in step 2, you know I've got to make sure this validation rule is inactivated, and I also need to unrequire these fields. So something that's probably one of the big, seems to be, right, Caroline, what we're seeing the big issues being.
Yep.
Always run the health check. That's a big one. So this is the health check after converting the model. So it went from a one-to-one model to the household account model in that test instance. And you can see the failures. And basically what this is saying is, it looks like you're using both household and one-to-one accounts, and that's probably not a good thing. So pick one. And that's because all the one-to-one individual accounts were still in the instance. That's what this is telling me. So each one of these is telling you something that you need to work on. And that's why this health check is so helpful. Running it periodically on your data would not be a bad thing. It would be helpful. It doesn't hurt anything. So that's sort of the health check. And then I think the key piece we talked about, just installing. If you were just installing the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3.0, not converting, obviously, follow these steps. This is exactly what you want to be doing. If you are doing the conversion, and you remember I said this earlier, give yourself the time to do the conversion. Again, this is not a lunch hour thing. This is something you need help, or that you need to do with mindfulness and carefulness. This is not something you want to do just overnight.
And we should point out, which goes to your question, Eric, I mean, you don't have to do these two things all at the same time. So you can you can upgrade, you can run the health check, you can install Nonprofit Starter Pack 3, and you can continue to use whatever model you use now. And just
thank you, Eric.
See how it goes. Yeah.
Yes, very, very good point. Yeah, absolutely don't have to do it all in one day. Good point. But here are the steps that I took in upgrading, and ones that worked well, and some things that I learned along the way. So first thing you definitely want to make the decision to do this is to change the account model from whatever you are using to the household account model, so that when new data is being entered in, it's being entered in the way that you want it to be. I like to do it in the beginning. Some people say it after you install. I just think it's a good mental check to do it right away. Ensure that then one of the things that's going to be available to you is a record type, the household account. It gets installed, but it's not available to all profiles, so you need to make it available. So it's a security setting. You just need to make sure that it's available at least to your profile, because you're going to be doing the update. But again, you'll probably want it available to all the profiles in your instance. then to use the utility, so that's really the next step is you append to the end of your Salesforce instance this URL that I'm showing you here, or the /apex/NPSP, that whole thing. And then the conversion tool will show up. So you'll see, I didn't do a screenshot of this, but it will show you, this is going to convert. It explains about 10 steps of things that you should do, like turning off your required fields, validation rules. There's a whole series of them that you want to follow. Read those carefully before you actually hit convert. And that's just an example URL for you. This conversion, basically what it's going to do is it's going to take all of your current households, turn them into accounts with the household account record type, and then add each of the contacts that's in the current household as a contact to this new household account that was just created. Change all of the donation or the opportunities, the account to the new household account. And, it's going to run it against all your data. So as you can imagine, for some of you, this might take some time just for the data itself. For some of you, it might not. Maybe a relatively quick process. That's why it's important that you take your time. The households and the one-to-one accounts are not removed, so they don't delete anything. But your page layouts are going to need to get modified. So you're going to have to add new fields to your accounts, households and organizations, and to your contact page layouts. You're probably going to want to remove some fields on your account and contact page layouts that are no longer being used, like the household field. You're not going to use that anymore. You're going to be just using the account field. And if you added fields to your household object, you want to make sure those fields are also added to your account object and port over any data for that newly created household account. So that's also going to be something else you're going to have to do. You're going to have to apply the Manage Household View override on the account, and then remove the view override that was used to hide your one-to-one accounts. So there was code behind the scenes to do that. These are steps that you can do later, but after you've checked things out and make sure things work right, are looking good, you can remove the unneeded one-to-one accounts, and you can use mass delete in Salesforce to do that. And then, of course, after you've moved things around, you can remove the unneeded household records. You can't uninstall that package. That's part of Cumulus, and it's there and available because there are people that are still using it. You can't delete the object, but you can hide it from tabs and reports, so it doesn't have to be visible to anyone. And then down at the bottom there, and we're going to give you guys access to these slides, but you will see there's a URL there for a post-install checklist that is pretty well documented what to do after installation.
So, and it's interesting, it seemed to me, Ashima, that actually this is what takes the time. I mean, running that data conversion is it's a process and it happens, but it's amazing how much fiddling there is to do after it, just while you kind of get everything to look right and find out whether you've got all the right fields. It was interesting when you gave me access to that, to your test org yesterday, is how many things I just moved around. And I'm sure you'd already done some, and it's interesting. That's the fiddly stuff that's going to take time.
Absolutely, and I think having two or more people involved, thinking through and working through, and pulling Caroline or I into conversation about how will we go about starting, and where do we begin, and helping you kind of organize. That's really important. Going to this account model is no small task. It seems like it should be, but it's not. And there are steps that need to be taken and things that you probably just didn't think about because you had customized your instance in a way that no one else did. So one of the things I noticed was that on the household, there were a couple fields that we created that did not get moved over to the account. So I need to now go and export that and import it in using Demand Tools or Epsona or some tool that will let me do that. So there's some little steps you have to take that you probably didn't think about.
Mm. And I have to say that there are a few of my clients who are on the call who are already using a kind of hybrid of the household account model, and so you're in a position that should make conversion much easier, because there isn't actually any data to move over. It's more just going to be actually working on these layouts and adjusting some of the fields. And the biggest difference that you will notice is in actually when you start creating new records, because those of my clients who are already using the household account model, the way that I've had to set it up for you is that you've had to set up the household first and then add contacts to it. And so the changes that you will now be able to start the way that we started in the demo today, which is that you can create the contact first and have the household automatically created for you. So that will be a time saver. Julie, you asked where we could get the links to install Nonprofit Starter Pack 3, which is probably a good segue into this. So the basic starting place is the new Nonprofit Starter Pack donation documentation section, which is available either in the Power of Us hub if you're logged in. It's also available via this link if you're not logged in. And there's a whole load of links there, including the now just one install link to get hold of the packages. And it's basically set up with the assumption that you're going to install into a sandbox first. In fact, it is exactly the same link, isn't it, Ashima, for if you're going into production, but start with a sandbox. So that's the place to go.
And it asks you, do you want to install this in a sandbox or a production instance?
Yeah.
And when you're in, just, don't be in your production instance. Don't be logged into your production instance when you do the test, when you're actually installing it into the sandbox, because you might pick the wrong thing and then you just in production you didn't mean to do that. So best to just be in test. So we'll share this with everyone, this resource, migration to the household account model. There's a great piece of information there, as well as the groups are fantastic. So if you can join both of these groups, the Nonprofit Starter Pack and probably the beta testing, if you really want to get into some of the nitty-gritty, they're very helpful, good resources. All right.
Okay, so Patty has asked if we're changing our account model, do you recommend waiting? Just to gauge, because I know I will be asked approximately when do you think the kinks will be worked out, and when would you recommend an upgrade? Do you think we're waiting a month? Do you think we're waiting 2 months? General idea would be fine. So it's interesting. I think that part of there's been a sort of they did a lot of testing, and then everything went public, and it's amazing how many things have kind of come up this week for people. I would have thought that probably waiting until after Dreamforce, so that's sometime in October, is about the minimum. It also depends a bit how adventurous you are. It's not that I think that anything is going to break or you're not going to lose anything that you currently have. It's just that as people are kind of going into the new model and are exploring and investigating, they're kind of coming up to the, oh, you didn't finish fixing that, or you didn't make that quite happen the way that we want it to happen. So I think it depends a bit whether you would like to be part of that process and basically finding out what's missing and giving feedback to the foundation, in which case you might want to upgrade pretty soon, or you may want to wait maybe 2 months or 2 or 3 months, or maybe towards the end of the year, and then decide that that's when you want to upgrade and let other people ask the questions first.
Yeah, I agree. And I think being on those groups, the less, you'll start to, and you don't need to read all the detail, but the less trouble you're seeing people have, the more they're asking questions about functionality and less about installing and converting. That can be the trigger for, okay, they're asking more, how do I use it versus it's not working, I can't get it installed. And that's really what the problem will be. It won't be that you'll get it in and it breaks everything. It will be, as Caroline said, it will be, I can't get it installed. So that will be the thing that will stop you from using it. So hopefully that helps a little bit, kind of our consultant answer of it depends. Everything else.
But there's also an example I was going to give you. I was hoping that I could give you a demo of what I thought way back in an early version was really cool about primary affiliations and soft credit roll-ups, in that it would actually create a contact. I'm sure that in the first version of it I saw is when, if you had a donation from an organization, it would give a soft credit, a contact roll, to somebody with the primary affiliation. And it's disappeared. And I was all ready to demo it, and it's like it's gone. But then I noticed that then there was a whole discussion has started about that. So it's not that something is broken or it's wrong. It's just that actually it didn't quite make it to the final cut. And if you wait a couple of months, then some of those things will come back in and you'll have all the bells and whistles. Whereas if you upgrade at this stage, you might be posting something to say, hey, why isn't this here? Because I thought it would be a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Hopefully that helps, Patty.
So
do you want to ask if anyone has questions?
Well, I'm just looking.
Time, or are we out of time, Caroline?
Patty says yes, thanks. We have about 5 minutes. So yes, please, if anyone has any other questions. Otherwise, the slide up here now is showing you where to find us. Or actually, should we do this last slide, Ashima, while people are thinking of questions, and then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So just so you know, Caroline and I are working on a whole series of what we're calling do-it-yourself workshops. They're going to be small, so we're going to limit the size to 10, unlike this one, which was just free. We wanted it open to our client base to provide you with information about the starter pack, the 3.0. And again, we're going to be running it again after Dreamforce. But these two, creating practical reports to measure fundraising efforts and cleaning up messy data with demand tools, will hone in on very specific tactical things that you can do. And all of our clients, of course, receive a discount. We'll be sending out email and information to you, but you can visit the website here as well and register if any of these sound interesting to you. And we will have a series of them coming up. So it doesn't look like any other questions popped up, Caroline. We'll give everyone a few more.
Well,
thanks,
Paige has told us we have nice voices, so thank you very much, Paige.
Thanks,
much appreciated.
That was very sweet of you. Patty, the trainings are not free. They'll be $40 for our clients and then $70 for non-clients.
I'm afraid we're putting a lot of time into setting them up, so this is trying to get at least some compensation for the time.
Right.
We'd love to give them away for free, but
we're trying to make them very practical, and we don't mute anyone, and they're really good. You'll get a lot out of it. I don't think we have any other questions. Give everyone one more minute, and then we'll say thank you all for attending and being here and being so attentive and listening, and hopefully you have more questions and you're going to be excited about getting in your instance of Salesforce upgraded to 3.0. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for taking the time out of your day, and it's been great to share this with you.
Yeah, take care, and we will talk to you soon.
Yeah, all right. And we'll email you out the recording. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Bye-bye.